The sardines were almost gone. Rory Hale tilted the tin and counted 2 left. He set one aside for Wren, because she always came around before dark, and he ate the other slowly, the way a man eats when he has learned not to rush good things. He was sitting on a flattened cardboard box under the Route 9 overpass. His back rested against the concrete pillar he had started thinking of as his wall. 6 years under this bridge had given him a sense of ownership that had nothing to do with paperwork. He had a sleeping bag, a plastic bin for dry goods, a small battery lantern, and 3 crates of books he had collected from dumpsters behind libraries and secondhand shops. On this particular Tuesday evening in October, he was reading a water-damaged copy of Marcus Aurelius, and the world was leaving him alone. That was when the drone came through. IT moved like a hummingbird, small, silver, slightly too smooth in its motion to be any kind of bird. It drifted in from the south end of the overpass, floated at about head height, and passed within 2 feet of Rory without slowing. A pale blue light flickered across his forearm for less than a second. Then the drone was gone, out the north end of the overpass and into the gray October air. Rory watched it go. He looked at his forearm. Nothing there. He turned back to his book. He had no way of knowing that in the half-second of that pale blue light, a scanner had read every strand of his DNA. He had no way of knowing that the drone had been doing this all day across the city, cataloging skin cells, hair follicles, biological signatures, as part of a survey that had been quietly mapping Earth's biodiversity for the past 3 months. He had no way of knowing that out of the 11,240 people scanned that day, his sample had triggered an alert buried so deep in the drone's programming that even its operators had forgotten it was there. He turned a page. Marcus Aurelius was talking about the smallness of human ambition against the size of time. Rory found that comforting rather than depressing. He had a theory that most people read the Meditations wrong. They thought it was about endurance, about grinding through suffering. He thought it was about learning to find the present moment genuinely sufficient. Not as a consolation prize, as the actual thing. Wren arrived at 6:20, the way she usually did, appearing from the direction of the drainage tunnel with her hands in the front pocket of a gray hoodie 2 sizes too big for her. She was 16 and had been sleeping rough for 8 months. She had never told Rory why she left, and he had never asked. She sat across from him, and he slid the tin toward her without looking up. She ate the sardine in one bite, made a face, ate it anyway. What are you reading? A Roman emperor talking to himself. What about? How to be a person without making it everyone else's problem. Wren considered this. Is it working? For him or for me? Either. Debatable, Rory said, and turned another page to 22 light minutes above them. The survey drone docked with a small relay station in low Earth orbit and uploaded its daily data package. The package was compressed, encrypted, and transmitted on to a Solari processing hub located at a comfortable distance past the moon. There, a sorting algorithm began working through 11,240 genetic samples, tagging, filing, archiving. IT reached sample 714. The algorithm did not flag it. The algorithm below it did not flag it. But buried at the 6th processing level, a routine so old it had been written into the system before anyone currently working on the survey had been born, something woke up. A genetic matching protocol, running a comparison against a reference sequence that had been sitting in the database for over 1,000 years, untouched, waiting. The match was not partial. It was not approximate. It was complete. What happened next was automatic. The relay station did not ask anyone's permission. It did not send a message to the Solari survey team sleeping in their bunks. It simply transmitted a burst signal on a frequency that the galaxy had not used in a millennium. A formal veil theory recognition frequency, carrying a single structure message in a language that almost no one alive could read. The message said, in the legal terminology of a dead civilization, bloodline confirmed. Succession protocol initiated. Keeper systems, Wake.in 17 star systems, things that have been sleeping for 1,000 years, opened their eyes. None of this reached Rory Hale. He finished his chapter, closed his book, and tucked it carefully into the dry crate. He banked the small camp stove for warmth. Wren had fallen asleep, sitting up, the way young people can, her back against the adjacent pillar. He put a second blanket over her without waking her, the way you do when you have learned that some kindnesses only work in silence. He lay down and looked up at the underside of the Route 9 overpass, listening to the traffic move above him like slow thunder, and fell asleep. 340 light years away, a door that had been sealed for 1,000 years unlocked itself and began, very slowly, to open. The pigeons left first. Rory noticed that on the third morning after the drone. Every morning for 6 years, the pigeons had gathered on the crossbeam above his camp at dawn. He had names for 3 of them. Not affectionate names, just identifiers, the way you name a recurring problem. That Thursday morning, the crossbeam was empty. The birds were gone before first light, and the silence they left behind had a different texture than ordinary quiet. He was boiling water on the camp stove, measuring out instant coffee with the discipline of a man who knows the bag has to last a week. When the 4 figures appeared at the south end of the overpass, they walked in a line. That was the first wrong thing. People who came under the overpass walked the way most people walk, loose, variable, slightly angled toward whatever they were looking at. These 4 walked in a line, evenly spaced, at a pace that was just slightly too smooth. They wore dark suits, not expensive suits. Suits that were trying very hard to look like what a suit looks like in the way that a drawing of a chair looks like a chair, but you would not want to sit in it. Rory looked at them over his tin cup. He had spent 6 years learning to read who came under this overpass. City workers, social service people, the occasional lost driver, the regular trouble that moved through at night. These 4 did not fit any category he had. The nearest one stopped 6 feet away. The form was male, looked at Rory with eyes that were slightly too still. "Rory Hale," it said. Not a question. "Generally," Rory said. "You need to come with us." "For what reason?" The figure paused in a way that felt less like hesitation and more like processing. "For your safety." Rory looked at all 4 of them. Then he looked past them, calculating. "I'd feel safer staying here, thanks." That was when the sound of boots on asphalt came from the other end of the overpass, and Officer Preet Sandhu walked in from the north side, one hand already on her radio, because she had been doing welfare checks along this stretch of Route 9 for 2 years, and she had never seen 4 people in identical dark suits standing at a homeless camp at 7 in the morning, and she was not going to start pretending that was normal. She stopped, looked at the 4 figures, looked at Rory. "Morning, Rory. Everything okay?" "That," Rory said carefully, "is currently being established." Preet's hand moved from her radio to her belt, not to her weapon, just closer to it. She had good instincts. She had learned, in 12 years on the job, that instincts were not magic. They were just pattern recognition working faster than language. Her patterns were screaming. "Can I ask who you folks are?" The 4 figures looked at each other. Something passed between them that wasn't speech. Then the lead one said, "We are leaving," and they turned and walked away, back the way they had come, in the same too smooth line, and were gone around the corner before Preet could get a plate number. Not that they had a vehicle she could see. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked over to Rory, who had gone back to his coffee. "Who were they?" she asked. "I genuinely don't know," Rory said, which was true, "but I don't think they were human." Preet looked at him with the particular expression of a person deciding how seriously to take a statement. Rory was not, in her experience, a man who said strange things for effect. She had found him, over 2 years of welfare checks, to be one of the more straightforwardly honest people she encountered on her route. She pulled out her notebook. "What makes you say that?" The way they moved, the way they talked, the pause before every answer, like translation was happening. He drank his coffee, and the eyes were wrong. She wrote this down, which surprised him. He had expected more pushback. "I'm going to call this in," she said. "You'll enjoy explaining it. I explain strange things for a living." She looked at the empty south end of the overpass. "Stay here today, okay? Don't go anywhere." He gestured at the camp around him, at the books, the stove, the sleeping bag. "Where would I go?" Preet left. Rory sat. He picked up the Marcus Aurelius, but found he couldn't settle into it. His mind kept returning to the eyes of the lead figure, the stillness in them, the quality of attention that had no warmth in it, no impatience, no anything that he recognized as a person looking at another person. He had been looked at with pity. He had been looked at with contempt, with the specific blankness that people use when they don't want to see you. He had been looked at with casual human cruelty and with genuine human kindness. He knew the full range. This had been different. This had been something looking at data and confirming it was present. By noon, Preet had reached Dr. Nadia Osei through a contact at the State University, and Nadia, sitting in her office surrounded by printed signal transcripts, was reading the same sequence of alien character for the 16th time, a sequence she had been slowly, painstakingly working to decode since Tuesday night, and beginning to understand that somewhere in the city a specific person had been found. She had a name now. Transliterated, uncertain, but a name. She reached for her phone. It did not ask for permission to land. That IKT descended through the cloud cover at dusk on Friday. Not the small hummingbird drone from Tuesday, and not the four still-eyed figures in suits. This was something else. A craft the size of a city bus, the color of old iron, moving with a silence that pressed against the ears the way a held breath does. It did not land. It stopped 40 feet above the Route 9 overpass and stayed there, displacing no air, making no sound, its shadow spreading across the bridge and the camp beneath it like a slow tide. Rory looked up from his book. Preet had stayed close all day. She was standing 10 feet to his left, one hand on her radio, the other open at her side. Nadia had arrived an hour ago, a compact woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up in her hair and a bag full of printed transcripts, and she was now gripping her own bag very tightly and not speaking. The craft on her side opened like an eye. A voice came out, not from a speaker, not through any visible mechanism, just a voice coming from the air itself, in English that was precise and slightly formal, the way a language sounds when someone learned it entirely from documents. Rudy Hale, I am Archivist Dale. I represent the keeper systems of the Veil Theory continuity. I apologize for the delay. Calibration took longer than expected. You have questions. I will answer them. Rory put his bookmark in. Who are the Veil Theory? A civilization. Interstellar in reach. They ceased active function approximately 1,012 years ago, following a period of internal conflict. You are the last confirmed genetic heir to their primary ruling bloodline. How? Your ancestry traces through an unbroken maternal line to the last Veil Theory diplomat who chose to remain on Earth rather than return home during the collapse. She assimilated. Her descendants forgot. The genetic sequence persisted regardless. Rory looked at Preet. Preet looked back at him with an expression that said, I am writing all of this down, but I am also not doing well. What does being the heir mean practically, he asked. Under Veil Theory succession law, which remains binding under the Interstellar Continuity Accords, you have legal standing to claim dormant Veil Theory assets. These include 7 uninhabited star systems, an orbital archive containing the complete record of Veil Theory civilization, and 1 surviving deep storage warship, the Remembrance, currently located 41 light-years from this planet. Nadia made a sound that was not quite a word. What happens if I don't claim them? Rory asked. The assets remain in contested status. A consortium called the Groven Compact has been operating under salvage law in 3 of the 7 systems for approximately 60 years. Without an heir's claim, they will eventually absorb those territories legally. With a claim on record, their operations become retroactively illegal under the Continuity Accords. And the men who came for me on Thursday, Groven Intelligence, they intercepted the bloodline confirmation signal. Their preference is that this conversation not happen. Preet said quietly, Are they going to try again? Yes. You have approximately 48 hours before their approach shifts from covert to something requiring a different response. Rory stood up. He was a tall man, thinned down by years of careful eating, with the posture of someone who had long since made peace with taking up exactly the space he actually needed. He walked to the edge of the overpass and looked up at the craft above him. I want to see the archive, he said, before I decide anything. I want to see what I would be inheriting. Dale's voice was quiet. That is an unusual first request. My second request is that you explain why the kingdom fell. Not the summary, the real account. A pause. Also unusual. I've read about a lot of collapsed civilizations, Rory said. The thing they all have in common is that the people inheriting them were the last to understand why they collapsed. I'd rather not do that. The craft descended another 10 feet. Rin chose this moment to appear from the drainage tunnel, stop dead, look up at the iron-colored vessel hanging over the overpass, look at Rory, and say, "I leave for one day. We're going to look at some archives," Rory told her. "In that, apparently. Am I invited?" Dale's voice returned. "The invitation is for the claimant. She stays close," Rory said. "That's not negotiable." Another pause, longer this time. "Acceptable." The transit was not what any of them expected. There was no dramatic beam of light, no turbulence, no sense of movement at all. One moment they were on the overpass. The next they were standing in a room that smelled of something between clean stone and old paper, curved walls glowing faintly, and through a wide viewport. The earth was already small and getting smaller. Nadia sat down on the floor. Not dramatically. Her legs just decided they were done. Preet stood very still with her hand near her sidearm, because she was a professional, and then slowly moved her hand away from it because she was also practical. Rory walked to the viewport and looked at the planet he had lived on his entire life from a distance he had never imagined. It was smaller than he expected. It was more beautiful than any photograph had suggested. "Show me," he said to Dale, "why they fell." The archive opened around them like a book. The archive did not look like data. IT looked like a room full of light arranged into shapes. Pillars of recorded thought standing floor to ceiling, each one containing centuries of a civilization's accumulated knowing. History, law, science, music, letters between people who had been dead for 1,000 years. Arguments and apologies and discoveries and grief. All of it preserved in crystalline structures that Nadia moved between with the careful reverence of someone walking through a place they had dreamed about without knowing it existed. She was not crying yet. She was the kind of person who holds it together right up until she doesn't. Preet moved through the room in a slow, methodical loop, out of habit, cataloging exits she could not find and threats that weren't there. Rin touched nothing and watched everything. Rory went straight to the historical record. Dale guided him to it without being asked. The record was not a summary or a curated account. It was raw. Council transcripts, population reports, letters from the outer systems, records of decisions made in rooms by people who believed entirely and without doubt that their blood made them right. The veil theory had not been cruel. Exactly. That was the thing Rory found most troubling as he read. They had been certain. The ruling bloodline had governed for so long, and governed with enough competence, that the competence had curdled into assumption. They stopped asking whether their decisions were good and started asking only whether they were properly authorized. The answer was always yes. The authorization always traced back to the bloodline. The bloodline was therefore always right. The Civil War, when it came, lasted 19 years. It was not led by the poor or the oppressed, though there were many of both. It was led by the veil theory's own scientists and architects and teachers, people who had built the civilization alongside the ruling line and had finally, after generations, run out of patience for being told their expertise mattered less than someone's ancestry. The ruling family had not understood, even at the end, why it was happening. Rory closed the record. He sat with it for a while. Around him, the archive hummed. Nadia was somewhere deeper in the stacks and had gone quiet. Preet had found a place to lean against the wall where she could see the room. "Dale," Rory said. "Yes. Is there a way to claim the inheritance without claiming the authority that came with it?" Silence. A long one. The kind that felt like something genuinely being considered rather than processed. There is a mechanism called the Declaration of Custodianship. It was written into the succession protocols by a reformist faction during the early Civil War period. It was never invoked. Under its terms, an heir may claim the assets and legal standing of the bloodline, while formally renouncing governing authority. The assets become protected heritage rather than personal property. The claimant becomes a custodian, responsible for preservation, not rule. What does preservation involve? Ensuring the archive is maintained. Ensuring the 7 systems are protected from exploitation. periodic legal review under the continuity accords. You would have standing to file challenges and make representations. You would not have the power to govern. That's what I want, Rory said. Preet spoke from the wall. There's a catch. There is, Dale confirmed. The declaration must be physically registered at the Continuity Hall on Ethis, the original Veil Theory homeworld. It cannot be transmitted or filed remotely. The claimant must be present. Where is Ethis? 340 light years from Earth. Preet straightened up. And the Groven? Their nearest vessel is currently positioned between this ship and the direct route to Ethis. They cannot legally interfere on a Veil Theory world, but they are not obligated to make the journey easy. Ren had drifted over during this conversation. She was sitting on the floor near Rory's feet, listening. So you have to go through them to get there, she said. Or find a route they aren't watching. Preet said Nadia's voice came from deep in the stacks. The Solari. They waited. She emerged a moment later, glasses now on her face, a look on her that mixed exhaustion with something electric. The Solari are neutral intermediaries under the same continuity accords. Their survey drone is the one that started this. They are, according to everything I have read in the last hour, deeply invested in not being responsible for a diplomatic incident. If we asked them for transit protection, they would almost certainly say yes, because the alternative is being blamed for whatever the Groven do to the last heir of a civilization they accidentally woke. Rory thought about this. Outside the viewport, Earth had become a small blue circle hanging in a very large dark. He thought about the Veil Theory rulers reading their own history and not understanding it. He thought about a civilization that had built something extraordinary and then confused the building of it with the right to own it forever. He thought about what it meant to inherit something and what the difference was between carrying it forward and simply repeating it. Then he thought about the declaration, about being a custodian rather than a king, about making sure the archive survived, the ruins were protected, and the dead were not simply absorbed by the next set of people who were certain they deserved things that he stood up. Contact the Solari, he said to Dale. Ask them for an escort. Be polite. Tell them we understand it was an accident and we are not assigning blame. He picked up his copy of Marcus Aurelius from where he had set it down. Then get us to Ethis. The Solari said yes within 6 minutes. Dale relayed the response with what Rory was beginning to recognize as the Keeper AI's version of dry humor. They agreed with unusual speed for a species that typically deliberates for several days on routine matters. It appears the prospect of being held responsible for interstellar conflict has a clarifying effect. 3 Solari escort vessels fell into formation around the Keeper ship within the hour, small, triangular craft in muted green, each one broadcasting the Solari diplomatic frequency on a continuous loop. It was the interstellar equivalent of walking through a rough neighborhood with a very official-looking badge held up high. The Groven were not impressed. Their ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the outer system with the particular confidence of something that knows it is the largest object in the immediate area. It was not classified as a warship under the continuity accords. It was classified as a security and resource management vessel, which was a category of ship that had weapons the way some people have opinions. Everywhere, constantly, and aimed at things. Dale translated the incoming transmission without editorializing. The Groven envoy's message said that Rory's bloodline claim was unverified and potentially destabilizing, and that for his own safety and the stability of interstellar order, he should submit to Groven protective custody, pending a review process that would take, at minimum, several decades. Preet read the translated text twice. Protective custody, she said. For decades. Standard Groven administrative language, Dale said. It means they would hold him until the legal window for filing the declaration expired and the assets defaulted to contested status, which they would then resolve in their favor. So it means jail, Ren said. It means disappear, Preet said. Rory read the message a third time. Then he looked at Nadia, who had been sitting cross-legged on the floor with her printed transcripts for the past 2 hours, cross-referencing sections of Veil Theory legal code, with the focus of a woman who had found her life's work arriving all at once and was not going to waste a second of it. Nadia, he said, the continuity accords. What do they say about interference with a recognized bloodline claimant in transit to a filing site? Nadia flipped 3 pages. Interference with a confirmed heir traveling to register a valid succession claim is classified under Article 14 as an act of obstruction against the accords themselves. Any party found to have committed it is subject to sanctions by all signatory species. Is the Groven Compact a signatory? Yes. They signed 42 years ago when it was convenient for them, specifically because Article 14 was not yet on the table. Rory turned to Dale. Transmit a response to the Groven envoy. Tell them we have noted their concern. Tell them we are a confirmed claimant in transit to a valid filing site under Article 14, under Solari Diplomatic Escort, and that any interference with this transit will be transmitted to all signatory parties with full documentation. Thank them for their time. Dale was quiet for a moment. You wish me to send that verbatim? Edit for tone, if needed. Be polite. The response went out. The Groven ship held its position for 47 minutes. Rory spent those 47 minutes reading. Ren spent them watching the Groven ship through the viewport with her chin in her hands. Preet spent them standing very still in the way that experienced officers stand still when they are ready to move fast. Nadia did not look up from her transcripts. At the 48-minute mark, the Groven ship moved. Not toward them. Away, repositioning to a different part of the outer system, maintaining distance, watching. Not leaving, but no longer blocking. They're not gone, Dale said. They will observe and continue to look for legal leverage, but they will not intercept. They never wanted a fight, Preet said. They wanted a quiet disappearance. Most people who take things, Rory said, prefer not to be seen doing it. The Solari escorts adjusted formation and the small fleet began the journey proper, a traverse that Dale explained would take several days in transit, passing through a sequence of relay points that the Veil Theory had built into the space between systems like stepping stones across a very wide river that on the second day of travel, Rory asked Dale about the remembrance. The warship sleeping near the brown dwarf 41 light-years away. He did not ask because he wanted a warship. He asked because he needed to know what he was promising to look after. Dale described it in careful terms. Built in the last generation of the Veil Theory Golden Period. Designed not for conquest, but for patrol, for keeping the outer systems safe from the kind of slow encroachment that had been nibbling at Veil Theory territory for generations before the Civil War made it irrelevant. Its crew of 400 had put it into cold storage themselves, choosing to preserve it rather than use it in a war they believed was wrong on both sides. They had left a note in the ship's log for whoever eventually came. The note said, "We hope whoever reads this waited long enough to know what to do with it." Rory read this and was quiet for a long time. Ren found him at the viewport that evening, watching the relay points passing like lit doorways through deep space. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Are you going anyway?" "That's generally what you do," he said, "when you're scared and it is the right thing." She leaned against the viewport beside him. They watched the stars move. Ahead of them, Ethis was waiting. The planet came into view on the 4th day, and it did not look dead. That was the first surprise. Rory had expected gray, dust, and silence, the visual language of abandonment that he had read about in enough history. Ruined cities stripped by weather, plains where nothing grew. Ethis from orbit was pale gold and deep green, forests reclaiming what cities had left behind, rivers finding their own courses again after 1,000 years without engineering to redirect them. From up here, it looked less like a grave and more like a place that had been given a very long rest. When the Keeper vessel crossed into Ethis orbit, the planet's automated systems read the bloodline signature. The lights came on. Not everywhere. Not the cities. Those were dark, and Rory was glad of that. He did not want to arrive at a city pretending to still be alive. But across the southern continent, along a ridge of low hills that the archive said had been chosen specifically for this purpose, a complex of buildings illuminated in sequence. Batweli. Doors cleared themselves of 1,000 years of settled dust. The Continuity Hall, built by the Reform faction during the Civil War, designed for exactly this kind of moment and never once used, opened its main doors for the first time in its existence. Dale's voice was quiet. In 1,000 years, this has not happened before. They descended. The Groven ship had followed them this far and stopped at the edge of the system. It could not enter Veil Theory space while a recognized heir was present without triggering every clause of Article 14 simultaneously. It sat at the boundary and watched. Rory decided not to think about it. The landing was soft. The air of Ethis smelled of forest and old stone and something else. Something clean and faintly electric that had no equivalent on Earth. Preet stepped out first, hand near her belt, and stood for a moment just breathing. Nadia followed and stopped with her face turned up toward the sky, which was a slightly different shade of blue than Earth's, and said nothing for a long time. Ren walked out, looked around at the pale, golden hills and the lit pathway leading up to the continuity hall, and said, "Okay, this is something." Rory came out last. He stood on the soil of a world that had last been touched by its civilization before any country he knew had existed. The grass, not quite grass, slightly wider-bladed and a deeper green, bent gently in a wind that smelled of nothing human at all. He stood there for a moment being exactly what he was, a middle-aged man from a highway overpass standing on an alien planet, holding a water-damaged copy of Marcus Aurelius. Then he walked up the pathway. The continuity hall inside was not grand in the way of palaces or monuments. It was grand in the way of libraries. High ceilings, careful proportions, the kind of architecture that says we built this for the work, not for the spectacle. The declaration chamber was a circular room at the center. A single console stood in the middle, its surface clear and waiting, lit from within. Dale's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "When you are ready." Rory set his book down on the edge of the console. He looked at the surface for a moment. He thought about what he wanted this to mean. Not power. He had never wanted power. He thought the desire for power was, in most people, a confusion. What they actually wanted was safety, or to be heard, or to not be afraid, and they had mixed that up with wanting control over others. He placed his hand on the scanner. It read him slowly, completely, not just the genetic sequence, but every layer all the way down. "Rory Hale," Dale said formally, "do you affirm the declaration of custodianship over the assets and heritage of the Veil Theory continuity, renouncing governing authority and accepting preservation mandate in its place?" "I do," Rory said. IT transmitted instantly. Across 17 systems, across the full network of dormant keeper stations, the declaration registered. The archive sealed, not against access, but against exploitation. The 7 systems moved from contested status to protected heritage under the continuity accords. The Groven salvage operations became, in the space of a legal second, retroactively unauthorized. It would take years to unwind in the courts. But the foundation had changed, Dale said. The Groven ship has departed the system boundary. Outside, Nadia had found a room in the continuity hall that appeared to be a secondary archive and had simply not come out. Ren was lying in the pale gold grass on the hillside, looking up at the alien sky and naming stars things that were not their names. Preet came and sat on the steps of the continuity hall beside Rory. They sat without talking for a while, the way people sit when a thing that was very tense has quietly resolved. "Dale mentioned you now have access to the Veil Theory economic instruments," Preet said eventually. "Apparently, you've been homeless for 6 years." "Yes. And you just saved a civilization's legacy and protected 7 star systems." "Custodian," Rory said. "I'm a custodian." She was quiet for a moment. Still, he opened the Marcus Aurelius. He found the page he had been on under the overpass last Tuesday before the hummingbird drone drifted through. He read the next paragraph. It was about the present moment being sufficient, about finding it genuinely enough. Not as a consolation, but as the actual thing he thought it still held up. Above them, the lights of Ethis stayed on. For the first time in 1,000 years, someone was home.